My parents loved only my golden brother, so they handed important documents to my work competitors. Hi everyone, I'm Adam, 35 years old, and right now I'm dealing with a situation in my family that's left me completely shaken. On the outside, my life looks perfect. I have a successful career in finance, a stable home, and my wife, Ava, who's been my anchor through everything. But within my family, things are far from perfect. I've always been the hard worker. Since college, I've supported myself, climbed the ladder in my field, and built a reputation as someone reliable and driven. My older brother, Lucas, is 41 and has had a very different path. He's never been able to settle into a career. He's tried everything: retail, sales, a failed business venture, but nothing has worked out. Our parents, Kevin and Sarah, have always been there for him, providing emotional and financial support at every turn. For me, it's been the opposite. I've never asked for anything, never needed financial help, but I've also never received much acknowledgement. It feels like my success is something they deliberately overlook, while Lucas's failures are excuses to pour more of their love and attention into him. I've tried to shrug it off for years, but a recent family dinner pushed things too far. It was supposed to be a simple night. Mom cooked her famous lasagna, and we were all sitting around the table catching up. Lucas has always been a bit smug, but this time, he decided to take a shot at me. Out of nowhere, he smirked and said, "You know, Adam, finance guys like you are the reason the world's such a mess. Heartless financiers squeezing the life out of the little guys." I felt the words hit me like a slap. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to step in, but then I saw it. Mom and Dad laughing. They weren't just amused. They looked like they agreed with him. Ava caught my eye and gave me a warning look. I know she meant well, but at that moment, I couldn't keep quiet. I forced a smile and replied, "Well, Lucas, if it weren't for people like me, you wouldn't have had the chance to try all those failed businesses of yours." The air in the room froze. Lucas's face turned red, and my mom immediately jumped in to defend him. "Adam, that's not fair. Your brother has had a hard time finding his path, and yet you've always been there to bail him out," I said, my voice trembling with anger. The argument escalated quickly. My dad slammed his fork down, and Lucas stormed out of the room. Ava and I left not long after, but the damage was done. The next day, Mom called me, and her tone was cold. She didn't ask how I was doing or try to smooth things over. Instead, she said, "Adam, you need to apologize to Lucas. What you said was hurtful." I couldn't believe it. "What about what he said?" "Lucas was joking," she replied sharply. "You know how he is. He jokes to lighten the mood." I couldn't hold back anymore. "Mom, he wasn't joking. He's been taking shots at me for years, and you've been letting him. Why do you always take his side?" There was silence on the other end before she sighed and said, "Adam, you've always been independent. You don't need us the way Lucas does." That stung. I knew my parents had always been more focused on Lucas, but to hear her say it out loud like that felt like confirmation of everything I'd ever feared. Ava tried to help me process it, but she had her own bombshell to drop. She'd overheard my parents talking after the dinner, and what she told me left me stunned. "They think you're arrogant," she said softly. "They think Lucas has more heart than you." Those words stuck with me. Arrogant? Heartless? I've spent my entire life trying to prove myself, trying to show them I'm worth their love and attention. And this is how they see me? I couldn't let it go. I invited everyone over to my house a week later to clear the air. When they arrived, the tension was palpable. I sat them down and laid everything out. I told them how I felt dismissed, overlooked, and undervalued. Lucas sat there looking uncomfortable, but my parents just stared at me, their expressions unreadable. When I finished, my dad spoke first. "Adam, we've always loved you, but you've got to understand, Lucas needs more support than you do. You've always been strong. You don't need us the same way." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "So because I don't need you, I don't deserve you?" "Don't twist our words," my mom snapped. "We're just saying Lucas has had a harder time in life." Ava, bless her, stepped in. "With all due respect, I think you're missing the point. Adam isn't asking for financial support. He's asking for acknowledgement. He's asking for you to see him." My parents didn't respond. Lucas finally spoke up. Look, Adam, I didn't mean to upset you at dinner. I was just joking. You weren't joking, Lucas, I said, my voice tight. You've been making digs at me for years, and everyone lets you get away with it. The conversation didn't go anywhere. My parents were stuck in their belief that Lucas needed them more, and Lucas didn't seem to think he'd done anything wrong. As they left, my mom hugged me and said, "We'll talk soon," but I knew we wouldn't. Now I'm left trying to figure out my next steps. Do I keep fighting for a place in a family that doesn't seem to value me? Or do I let go and focus on the life Ava and I are building together? I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know I'm done being invisible. It feels like my life is unraveling faster than I can figure out what's going on. After the fallout with my family, I threw myself into work, hoping that at least one part of my life would remain stable. I've worked for years to build my reputation as a reliable, capable professional in finance. But recently, strange and unexplainable things have been happening at my job, and I can't shake the feeling that something, or someone, is behind it. It started small. I noticed that a few emails I was sure I had sent weren't showing up in my sent folder. At first, I thought maybe I'd forgotten to hit send. I even joked with my colleague, Jordan, about it during a lunch break. Jordan is the guy everyone in the office turns to for IT questions, and he's usually a step ahead when it comes to troubleshooting. "Maybe you're just overworked," he said, half laughing. "I can run a check on your system if you're really worried." I brushed it off. It's probably nothing, just me being scatterbrained, but it didn't stop there. A week later, I had a major meeting with a client, and when I opened my files to present the data, key parts were missing. The client was visibly unimpressed, and I left the room feeling like a complete idiot. That night, I stayed late, going through my notes and files to figure out what went wrong. I was sure I had saved everything correctly. The next morning, Jordan stopped by my desk. "Hey, Adam, I was reviewing some flagged activities on our server last night. Your account had some strange access times, like 3 a.m. strange. Did you log in from home?" I hadn't. In fact, I'd gone straight to bed after leaving the office. "Can you figure out what's going on?" I asked. Jordan nodded. "I'll dig deeper, but it might take a day or two. Just be careful, okay?" A few days later, things escalated. I was up for a promotion, a huge one. The role came with a $200,000 salary and a significant amount of responsibility. I'd been working toward this for years, putting in long hours and taking on extra projects. My manager, Danielle, had even hinted that the role was practically mine. But the day before the decision was supposed to be announced, Danielle called me into her office. "Adam, we need to talk," she said, her face serious. "There's been a concern raised about your conduct." My stomach dropped. "What kind of concern?" She hesitated. "Someone claimed you've been spreading confidential information about our clients. We've had reports of leaks, and some of the data points back to your account." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Danielle, that's not true. I'd never." "I want to believe you, Adam," she said, cutting me off. "But until we can sort this out, the promotion is off the table." I left her office in a daze. How could this be happening? That night, Ava found me sitting on the couch, staring at my laptop. She sat beside me, resting her hand on my shoulder. "You've been quiet since you got home. What's wrong?" I told her everything. She listened carefully, her face a mix of concern and confusion. "Do you think someone's doing this on purpose?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but it feels like I'm being set up." The next morning, things got even weirder. Lucas called me. I hadn't spoken to him since the family meeting, so I was surprised to see his name pop up on my phone. "Hey, Adam," he said, his tone overly casual. "I heard about your promotion." "Tough break." I froze. "How do you know about that?" "Mom mentioned it," he said quickly. "She said you were in line for something big at work, but there was something off about the way he said it. The details he knew didn't seem like something Mom would have casually mentioned." "Lucas, is there something you're not telling me?" I asked. "Relax," he said with a laugh. "You're always so paranoid. Just thought I'd check in." He hung up before I could press him further. Jordan came by my desk later that day with a grim look on his face. "Adam, we need to talk." He led me to one of the small conference rooms and shut the door. "I found something," he said, lowering his voice. Someone's been using your account to access files remotely. The IP address doesn't match your home or office. Can you track it? I asked. I'm working on it, he said, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, I'd suggest changing all your passwords and keeping an eye on your activity log. I felt a wave of relief knowing I wasn't imagining things, but the bigger question remained. Who was doing this? A week later, I got my answer, and it was worse than I could have imagined. Jordan managed to trace the IP address to a location downtown, a shared workspace known for its flexible rental terms. He dug a little deeper and found that one of the accounts associated with the space was under the name L. Adams. Lucas. My head spun as I tried to piece it together. Lucas had no reason to be anywhere near my work. He didn't even understand what I did for a living. But somehow, he was accessing my files, sabotaging my work, and ruining my chances at the promotion I'd worked so hard for. That night, I confronted Ava with what I'd learned. I think Lucas is behind this, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She looked shocked. But why? What could he possibly gain from this? I don't know, I admitted, but I'm going to find out. I decided to confront Lucas directly. I showed up at his apartment unannounced, my heart pounding in my chest. He opened the door, looking surprised to see me. Adam, what are you doing here? I pushed past him into the living room. Cut the crap, Lucas. I know what you've been doing. His face shifted, a mix of guilt and defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I snapped. I know you've been accessing my work files. I know you've been spreading rumors about me. Why are you doing this? For a moment, he looked like he was going to deny it again, but then his shoulders slumped. You've always had everything, Adam, he said bitterly. The career, the recognition, the life I wanted. I just wanted to level the playing field. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You sabotaged me because you were jealous? I didn't think it would go this far, he said quietly. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but more than anything, I felt a deep sadness. This was my brother, the person who was supposed to have my back. I wish I could say things had settled down after finding out Lucas was behind the sabotage at work, but they only got worse. If I thought my family couldn't disappoint me anymore, I was wrong. What I uncovered next made me question everything. My career, my family, and even my own judgment. It all started when I noticed a folder tucked away in a cabinet at my parents' house during a visit. Ava and I had reluctantly agreed to go over for dinner, hoping to keep some semblance of peace, but I wasn't feeling particularly friendly. While Ava chatted with my mom in the kitchen, I wandered into Dad's study. It was a place he always kept locked when we were kids, but now, it was left open, cluttered with papers and an outdated computer. I wasn't snooping, at least, not intentionally, but a folder sitting on the edge of the desk caught my eye. It was labeled with Lucas's name, and curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, expecting to see something mundane, maybe old school records or medical bills. What I found instead stopped me cold. It was a series of bank statements, each one showing regular transfers to Lucas's account. The amounts varied, but they ranged between $5,000 and $8,000. There were notes in Dad's handwriting beside each transfer, support for Lucas. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. This wasn't occasional help for an emergency. These were consistent payments, going back over a year. My pulse quickened as I realized the timeline lined up perfectly with when my problems at work had started. Ava found me in the study a few minutes later. Adam, what are you doing in here? I handed her the folder without a word. Her eyes scanned the papers, and I saw her expression harden. What the hell is this? Exactly what it looks like, I said bitterly. They've been funneling money to Lucas for over a year. I don't know why, but I'm going to find out. The next day, I decided to hire a private investigator. I'd never done anything like this before, but I felt like I was being dragged into a conspiracy and I needed answers. Ava was skeptical at first. Are you sure this is the right move? She asked as we sat on the couch, scrolling through profiles of local investigators. I don't know what else to do, I admitted. Lucas has already sabotaged my career, and now it looks like Mom and Dad have been supporting him the whole time. I need to know the truth. We settled on a PI named Erica Reyes. She came highly recommended, with a reputation for being thorough and discreet. When I met her at her office, I laid everything out: the missing emails, the sabotage, the money transfers. Erica listened carefully, taking notes. "It's possible your brother's been using the money for something bigger than just living expenses," she said. "If he's involved in any kind of fraud or corporate espionage, it won't take long to trace." 2 weeks later, Erica called me with an update. "You're not going to like what I found," she said, her voice steady but serious. She came over that evening and handed me a stack of documents. "Your brother has been impersonating you," she said bluntly. "What?" I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "He's been using your name and credentials to pass information to one of your company's competitors, Brightstone Capital. I found evidence of communication between him and one of their senior managers, a man named Travis Caldwell. Lucas has been feeding them inside information, and they've been paying him for it." I flipped through the documents, my hands shaking. Erica had included email transcripts, financial records, and even photos of Lucas meeting with Caldwell. The evidence was overwhelming. But how did he even get access to my credentials? I asked. Erica hesitated. "I think your parents might have helped." That night, I confronted my parents. I didn't call ahead or give them any warning. I just showed up at their house with the folder of bank statements and the documents Erica had gathered. When they opened the door, I didn't even bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past them into the living room. Mom looked confused. "Adam, what's going on?" I dropped the papers on the coffee table. "Care to explain these?" They both froze, their eyes darting between the folder and me. Dad was the first to speak. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" I snapped. "You've been giving Lucas thousands of dollars for over a year. Why?" Mom's face turned pale. "He needed help," she said quietly. "He was struggling." "Struggling?" I cut her off. "Struggling to sabotage my career? Because that's exactly what he's been doing with your help." They both looked shocked, but I didn't give them a chance to deny it. I pulled out Erica's documents and laid them on top of the bank statements. "Lucas has been impersonating me and passing confidential information to my competitors. And you've been funding him the entire time." Dad finally found his voice. "We didn't know he was doing that." "Then what the hell did you think he was doing with the money?" I demanded. "We thought he was just getting back on his feet," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "He told us he needed it for rent, for bills." "We didn't know." "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You've been enabling him for years, and now he's destroyed my career because of it." I left their house feeling more betrayed than ever. Ava was waiting for me when I got home, and I broke down as I told her what had happened. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can't let this slide." The next day, I contacted Danielle, my manager, and showed her the evidence Erica had gathered. She was horrified but grateful that I'd come forward. "This changes everything," she said. "We need to bring this to the board immediately." The fallout was swift. Brightstone Capital faced legal action for their involvement, and Lucas's role in the scheme was exposed. He was arrested for fraud and identity theft, and my parents, well, they haven't spoken to me since. After weeks of investigation and betrayal after betrayal, I finally had everything I needed. Solid, irrefutable proof that Lucas and my parents had been working together to sabotage me. The evidence was damning. Bank records showing regular transfers from my parents to Lucas, emails between Lucas and executives at Brightstone Capital, and, most chillingly, notes in my parents' handwriting about how this was all being done to restore balance. At this point, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. The hurt ran too deep, and I wasn't sure I'd ever recover. But I knew I had to confront them. For once, they needed to hear my side, and I needed answers. Ava helped me prepare for the meeting. She was as furious as I was, but she urged me to keep my emotions in check. "They'll try to twist this," she warned. "Don't let them." We decided to host the confrontation at our house. I called my parents and Lucas, insisting they all come over that Saturday. When they arrived, they looked uneasy. Mom tried to break the tension with a weak smile. "It's nice to see you, Adam," she said. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I gestured for them to sit down. Ava stood by my side, silent but supportive. I know everything, I began, my voice steady. I know about the money, the sabotage, the lies. And I have proof. I placed the folder of evidence on the coffee table. Go ahead. Take a look. They hesitated, but Lucas finally leaned forward and opened the folder. His face turned pale as he flipped through the documents. What the hell is this? He muttered. You tell me. I shot back. You've been passing confidential information to my competitors, sabotaging my career. And Mom and Dad have been funding you the whole time. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Adam, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I interrupted. I have the emails, the bank records, and even your notes about how this was all to restore balance. What kind of balance, Mom? What the hell does that even mean? Lucas exploded. You want to know? Fine. They made me do it. His sudden outburst stunned everyone. He stood up, his face red with anger and shame. They said you were the golden child, Adam, that you had everything while I had nothing. They wanted to even the playing field, to give me a chance for once in my life. I stared at him, struggling to process what he just said. You're blaming them? You had a choice, Lucas. You could have said no. He laughed bitterly. Do you have any idea what it's like to live in your shadow? To hear them talk about how perfect you are while I'm just a failure. You're a failure because you make terrible choices. I snapped. And this is the worst one yet. Mom burst into tears, and Dad finally spoke up, his voice stern but defensive. We were trying to protect the family, Adam. Your success has always been overwhelming for Lucas. We just wanted to help him feel like he mattered. By destroying me? I asked incredulously. You call that protecting the family? We didn't know it would go this far, Mom sobbed. But you knew, I said, my voice rising. You knew he was sabotaging me, and you funded him anyway. Don't pretend you're innocent in this. Ava finally stepped in. This isn't about family or unity, she said coldly. This is about control. You saw Adam's success as a threat, and instead of celebrating him, you tried to tear him down. That's not love. It's jealousy. Her words hung in the air like a slap. Mom looked at her, eyes wide, but said nothing. Lucas sank back into his chair, his anger fading into something that looked like regret. I didn't want it to go this far, he said quietly. But it did, I said. And now we're here. I stood up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I'm done, I said firmly. I'm done trying to earn your approval, done being a pawn in whatever game this is. If you can't see what you've done, if you can't take responsibility, then I don't see how we move forward from this. Mom started crying harder, but Dad just sat there, silent and stoic. Lucas avoided my gaze, staring at the floor. Ava and I walked them to the door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed them anything. I never imagined I'd have to fight for my professional reputation because of my own family, but here I was, walking into my company's headquarters with a folder full of evidence that I hoped would clear my name. The days leading up to this moment had been grueling, and I couldn't shake the knot of anxiety in my stomach. My career, my credibility, everything I'd worked so hard to build, was on the line. Ava had insisted on driving me that morning. She knew how much this meant to me, and her quiet support was the only thing keeping me steady. As we pulled up to the building, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You've got this, she said firmly. I nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. I'd scheduled a meeting with Danielle, my manager, and several members of the executive team, including the company's legal counsel, Victoria Ellis. Victoria was known for being sharp, no-nonsense, and fiercely protective of the company's interests. If anyone could get to the bottom of this mess, it was her. The conference room felt cold and sterile as I entered. Danielle greeted me with a cautious smile, but the tension in the room was palpable. Victoria sat at the head of the table, flipping through a stack of papers with the precision of a surgeon. Beside her was Jordan, the IT specialist who had first flagged the suspicious activity on my account. Adam, Danielle began, gesturing for me to sit. Thank you for coming in. We've reviewed the situation as best we can, but we understand you have additional information to share. I nodded and placed the folder on the table. Everything you need to know is in here, I said. Victoria picked up the folder and began flipping through its contents. As she read, Her expression shifted from neutral to something much harder to read. "These emails," she said, her voice trailing off. "This is damning evidence." She passed the folder to Danielle, who quickly scanned the documents. "Lucas was behind this?" Danielle asked, her tone incredulous. "Yes," I replied. "He accessed my credentials, impersonated me, and passed confidential information to Brightstone Capital. My parents were funding him, though they claim they didn't know what he was doing with the money." Victoria leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes fixed on me. "And how did you obtain this evidence?" "I hired a private investigator," I explained. "She traced the activity back to Lucas and provided the documentation you're holding now." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what I just said. Finally, Victoria spoke. "We'll need to verify this independently, but if it checks out, it clears your name entirely. You understand that this will also lead to legal action against Brightstone Capital and potentially your brother?" I nodded. "I understand. I just want my name cleared." Danielle gave me a small, reassuring smile. "Adam, if this holds up, you'll not only be exonerated, but we'll have to reconsider the promotion you were in line for." Her words gave me a glimmer of hope, but I knew better than to celebrate too early. Over the next few weeks, the company launched a full-scale investigation. Erica, the private investigator I'd hired, worked closely with Victoria and her legal team, providing additional evidence and testimony. Jordan also played a crucial role, digging through server logs and digital footprints to confirm that the activity traced back to Lucas. During this time, I kept my head down and focused on my work, though it was hard to concentrate with so much hanging in the balance. My colleagues were polite but distant, clearly unsure how to treat me while the investigation was ongoing. The rumors that had started months ago still lingered, and I couldn't wait for the day they'd finally be put to rest. 3 weeks later, I was called into another meeting with the executive team. This time, the atmosphere was markedly different. Danielle greeted me warmly, and Victoria's usual stern demeanor had softened ever so slightly. "Adam," Victoria began, "after a thorough investigation, we've confirmed that you were not responsible for any of the breaches. The evidence you provided was instrumental in uncovering the truth, and we owe you an apology for the doubts cast on your character." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you," I said quietly. Danielle smiled. "There's more. The board has reviewed your performance and the circumstances surrounding this situation. They've unanimously agreed to offer you the promotion, with an adjusted salary of $250,000. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I'd spent so long fighting just to prove my innocence that I hadn't even considered what would come next. "Thank you," I said again, this time with more confidence. "I won't let you down." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The promotion came with new responsibilities, a bigger office, and a sense of validation that I hadn't felt in a long time. My colleagues, once distant, began treating me with respect again, and the rumors that had plagued me finally died down. Brightstone Capital faced severe consequences for their role in the scheme, including hefty fines and legal action. As for Lucas, he was arrested and charged with fraud and identity theft. My parents, predictably, were furious with me for destroying his life, but I refused to let their guilt trips affect me. Ava and I celebrated quietly at home the night my promotion was announced. As we sat on the couch, sipping champagne, she turned to me and said, "I'm so proud of you, Adam. You didn't let them break you." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in months. "We got through this together," I said, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly believed it. After everything I'd been through, months of sabotage, betrayal, and endless stress, I realized I couldn't let it end with my brother and parents walking away without consequences. They had nearly destroyed my career, tarnished my reputation, and put Ava and me through hell. The evidence I'd gathered was overwhelming, and for once, I had the upper hand. This wasn't just about justice, it was about closure. Ava supported me every step of the way. "You need to do this," she said one night as we sat in the living room, surrounded by piles of documents and notes. "Not just for yourself, but so they understand that their actions have consequences." She was right. I started by hiring a new legal team to handle the case. Erica, the private investigator who had uncovered most of the evidence, recommended a law firm specializing in corporate and personal litigation. My attorney, Rachel Stein, was a no-nonsense powerhouse with a reputation for winning tough cases. "Adam, your case is strong," Rachel said during our first meeting. "The evidence of Lucas's actions is clear-cut, and your parents' financial involvement leaves them vulnerable to claims of fraud. This won't be easy emotionally, but legally, we're in a solid position." I decided to sue Lucas for defamation, as his actions had directly led to the damage to my reputation and career. For my parents, the charge was financial fraud. Their consistent, intentional funding of Lucas's activities made them complicit in the scheme, and I wasn't going to let them off the hook. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through my family. The moment they were served, my phone exploded with calls and messages from my parents and extended relatives. My mother, predictably, was the first to try to guilt me into backing down. "Adam, how could you do this to us?" she sobbed during one of her calls. "We're your parents. We only wanted what was best for the family." "What was best for the family?" I shot back. "You sabotaged me to prop up Lucas. You lied to me, funded his crimes, and nearly destroyed my career. Don't talk to me about family." Dad was no better. He tried a more aggressive approach, accusing me of being heartless and selfish. "We gave you everything, Adam," he said, "and this is how you repay us?" "You didn't give me anything," I replied coldly. "I worked for everything I have. And now, you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Lucas, on the other hand, was strangely quiet. I suspected his attorney had advised him to keep his mouth shut, but it didn't matter. The evidence against him spoke volumes. The court proceedings were grueling. Lucas's attorney tried to argue that his actions were the result of undue pressure from my parents, portraying him as a desperate man who had been manipulated into making poor decisions. "He's not a criminal," his attorney argued. "He's a man who felt overshadowed by his brother's success and was driven to act out of desperation." Rachel was having none of it. "Desperation does not excuse criminal behavior," she said, her tone sharp and authoritative. "Lucas made a conscious choice to sabotage Adam's career for personal gain, and he did so with full knowledge of the consequences." The evidence Rachel presented was damning. The emails, financial records, and Erica's testimony painted a clear picture of Lucas's actions. There was no escaping the truth. As for my parents, their attorney tried to argue that the payments to Lucas were simply acts of parental support, with no knowledge of how the money would be used. But Rachel countered with the notes I'd found in their handwriting, the ones that explicitly mentioned restoring balance and leveling the playing field. "These notes prove intent," Rachel said, holding up the documents in court. Adam's parents were fully aware of what Lucas was doing and chose to fund his activities regardless of the harm it would cause their other son. The verdict came after weeks of testimony and cross-examinations. The judge ruled in my favor on both counts. Lucas was ordered to pay $150,000 in compensation for defamation and the damage to my career. My parents were hit even harder with a $1 million judgment for financial fraud, including fines and restitution for the harm their actions had caused. When the verdict was announced, I felt a wave of relief, but also a strange emptiness. Winning the case didn't erase the betrayal or the pain. It didn't bring back the trust I'd lost in my family. But it was justice, and that was enough for now. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. My parents, unable to pay the judgment in full, were forced to sell their house, a sprawling property they had owned for decades. It sold for $850,000, which covered most of their debts but left them in a significantly reduced financial position. Mom called me after the sale, her voice trembling with anger and sadness. "We lost everything, Adam," she said. "Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy," I replied, "but I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourselves." Lucas, meanwhile, scrambled to come up with the money he owed me. He eventually managed to pay the $150,000, but not without severe financial strain. He lost his apartment and had to move in with a friend. After everything that had happened, I knew I needed to start fresh. Moving away seemed like the only way to truly leave the past behind. Ava suggested it first. She pointed out that there was nothing tying us to our old life anymore. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. When I got the job offer, a high-ranking position in a firm across the country, It felt like fate giving me an opportunity to rebuild. The move itself was chaotic. Packing up years of memories and belongings while trying to keep emotions in check was no small task. But Ava and I managed. The drive was long and quiet at times, each mile taking us further from everything that had happened. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety, excited to start anew, but also carrying the weight of what I had lost. The new city was nothing like where we had lived before. It felt alive, buzzing with energy. Ava and I found an apartment in a vibrant area close to the waterfront. The view from our windows was stunning, the kind of thing that makes you feel like life is full of possibilities again. It wasn't just a new apartment. It was a chance to redefine what our life could be. Starting my new job was both exciting and intimidating. The team was welcoming, and the work was challenging in the best way. My boss, Clara, stood out immediately. She had a sharp mind and a reputation for getting things done. I admired her, not just for her intelligence, but for the way she treated her team. With respect and encouragement, over time, she became more than a boss. She became someone I could trust. One day, after a particularly difficult meeting, she pulled me aside. "You've got something on your mind," she said. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated. Sharing personal details at work felt risky, but something in her tone made me feel safe. Slowly, I opened up about what had happened with my family. Clara listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. "You've been through a lot," she said when I finished. "But you're here now, and that says a lot about your resilience. Use what you've been through. It can be a strength, not just a scar." Her words stuck with me. They made me realize that my past didn't have to define me, it could shape me into someone stronger. It wasn't easy, but I started to let go of the anger and focus on what was ahead. Ava was my anchor through all of this. She had been my rock during the hardest times, and in this new chapter, she was my partner in building something better. We began making friends, starting with our neighbor, Marcus. He was a retired chef with a knack for hosting incredible dinner parties. Through him, we met people who felt like the kind of support system we had always wanted: genuine, kind, and supportive. One night, Marcus gave us a piece of advice that stuck. "This city is all about reinvention," he said, raising a glass of wine. "You've got a clean slate. Use it." And we did. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Ava and I built a community, made new memories, and started to feel like the pain of the past was finally fading. At work, Clara encouraged me to share my story at a company retreat. At first, I was hesitant. Speaking about my experiences felt too personal, too raw. But Ava pushed me. "Your story could help people," she said, "and maybe it'll help you too." The retreat was nerve-wracking. Standing in front of my colleagues, I felt exposed, but as I began to speak, something shifted. I shared everything: the sabotage, the legal battle, the pain of betrayal. I didn't sugarcoat anything, and when I finished, the room was silent. Then, one by one, people began to applaud. It was overwhelming, but also empowering. After the retreat, people started approaching me, sharing their own stories of toxic family dynamics and struggles. One woman told me she had finally set boundaries with her own parents because of what I shared. Another colleague said my story gave him the courage to leave a toxic work environment. It felt incredible to know that my pain had meaning, that it could help others. Over time, I started speaking at other events and conferences. Sharing my story became a way to heal, and it connected me with people who understood what I had been through. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, and neither were they. Through it all, Ava was there, cheering me on and grounding me when things felt overwhelming. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our apartment watching the city lights, she asked me if I regretted anything. "No," I said after a moment, "because it brought us here. Life isn't perfect. It never will be. But for the first time in years, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be." Starting over wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I've learned that letting go of toxic people, even family, doesn't mean losing who you are. It means finding yourself again. And for that, I'm grateful.